This is Brett the Hitman Hart, and you're watching another original wrestling documentary.
By the early 1970s, an ailing Jim Crockett was forced to retire, and his son-in-law John Wrigley had begun to take over many of the territory's responsibilities. Jim Crockett died on April 1, 1973, and control of the company was then ceded to his son, 28-year-old Jim Crockett Jr., who took over the promotion and ultimately renamed it Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling. Led by the younger Crockett, and under the guidance of a new creative force, former wrestler turned matchmaker George Scott, the promotion moved away from generally featuring just tag teams to primarily focusing on singles wrestling, although tag team matches continued to play a big part in the company. Jim Crockett Promotions had gradually phased out its multiple weekly television tapings in such cities as Charlotte, Greenville, and High Point, consolidating its production schedule into just one shoot, a Wednesday night videotaping at WRAL, TV, and Raleigh, and then syndicating the broadcast to several local TV stations throughout the Carolinas and Virginia. In 1981, Jim Crockett Promotions moved to the WPCQ TV studios in Charlotte, a station once owned by Ted Turner. Local shows hosted by announcers like Big Bill Ward from WBTV in Charlotte and Charlie Harville from WGHP in High Point gave way to Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling. Mid-Atlantic was hosted by Bob Caudle, a longtime WRAL weatherman. Caudle was joined in rotation by a number of co-hosts, everyone from Les Thatcher to Dr. Tom Miller, before David Crockett became Caudle's permanent color commentary man. For a brief period, a secondary show, East Coast Wrestling, was taped at WRAL, which was a repackaged version of Mid-Atlantic and was announced by Big Bill Ward. In 1975, Jim Crockett Promotions premiered a new syndicated B show, Wide World Wrestling, which was renamed Worldwide Wrestling in 1978. The original host of the show was former Georgia Championship Wrestling announcer Ed Capral. Other announcers included Les Thatcher, George and Sandy Scott, and Dr. Tom Miller. It was also hosted by the team of Rich Landrum and Johnny Weaver. In 1978, Jim Crockett Promotions later added a short-lived show, The Best of NWA Wrestling, which was taped at the WCCB studios in Charlotte and featured Johnny Weaver sitting down with top stars in a coach's show format. In 1976, Ric Flair amazingly returned from being injured in a horrible plane crash and quickly became the top heel. He came back as a second to Angelo Mosca in his matches with Wahoo and interfered to help Mosca win some matches. Then Flair made his ring return in Greensboro, North Carolina on January 31, 1976 against Wahoo, defeating him by countout. Over February and March, Flair tore up Wahoo's headdress on TV, and Flair also nearly blinded Wahoo in a match, which set up a feud that did huge business for many months in the territory. During the feud, Flair and Wahoo traded the Mid-Atlantic belt back and forth several times. Wahoo finished 1976 off winning the Most Popular Wrestler of the Year. Wahoo suffered a broken ankle on TV courtesy of a step-over grapevine from Greg Valentine. When Valentine did not release the hold on Wahoo immediately, Wahoo began screaming as the hold was put on. Wahoo was out for 8 weeks and was shown on TV many times recuperating. Valentine then started wearing the infamous "I broke Wahoo's leg" t-shirts on TV to end 1977. Wahoo came back in January 1978 for some revenge, and he got it months later when he defeated Valentine for the Mid-Atlantic Championship belt. Wahoo would only hold the belt for 2 months before Ken Patera defeated him for the title. Other top stars of the 70s were the Super Destroyer, Mr. Fuji, The Avenger, Tiger Conway Jr., Brute Bernard, Abe Jacobs, Kevin Sullivan, and Klondike Bill. Jim Crockett Promotions gradually began to expand, running shows in eastern Tennessee, parts of West Virginia, and even Savannah, Georgia. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, Jim Crockett Promotions ran regular shows in Cincinnati and even Dayton, Ohio. Crockett and Scott also bought the minority shares of Frank Tunney's Toronto-based promotion Maple Leaf Wrestling. Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling also aired on a Buffalo, New York station, enabling the Tunney-Crockett-Scott enterprise to bring a full slate of shows to Ontario and upstate New York. In the 1980s, Crockett began consolidating the southern franchises of the National Wrestling Alliance and discarding the Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling brand. Jim Crockett began promoting his events simply as the National Wrestling Alliance, although his promotion remained distinct from the larger NWA entity.